Hey guys, it's me with a new story. I'm so excited to start a new book with you guys. My most favorite thing about books is starting a new book because you're entering a brand new adventure, and then finishing a book because you are completing a story that you've been really invested in. We've grown to love our characters, and so both are very exciting to me. So today we are starting a brand new book, and it's a book that is quite a tale. I think you guys are really going to like this one. This book is called Wizard at Work. This is about a wizard who teaches at a wizard school, and he disguises himself during the year. He disguises himself to look as an older gentleman because he said that's what people think that a wizard should look like, but in reality, he's a pretty young wizard, and he's excited for this summer break in the book because he's going to not disguise himself, and he's got plans to garden and do all these fun hobby type things. But we all know wizards are magical, and so wizards are sometimes asked to do special things like rescue princesses, remove a curse, help you to grow golden cucumbers. And so sometimes he gets asked to do some extra wizardy jobs. And so he's trying to find the balance between being a wizard and taking a break. And sometimes that's hard to do. So let's get started. I cannot wait. I think this is going to be a great story. Let's get right on into it. Here we go. This first chapter is called How It All Starts. The wizard was minding his own business, well, mostly, when the witch either put a hex on him or she didn't. Well, it happened like this. The wizard was a young man who often magically disguised himself to look like an old man because that's what people kind of expected a wizard to look like. Because he ran a school for young wizards, he spent the school year looking like an old man, for he figured he'd get little respect from his students if they knew he was only a little bit older than they were. So once school was over for the year, it was quite a relief to take off this magical disguise and just relax. It would sort of feel like taking off shoes that are too tight, or finally taking off those fancy clothes you've been worried about staining all day. After what seemed an exceptionally harsh winter, and a spring that surely had taken longer than usual to arrive, he had packed the last of his students off for home. On this, the first day of summer vacation, he magically transported himself to the village of St. Wayne the Stutterer. St. Wayne was not one of the major saints, and the village was a small one. The wizard knew most of the people there, and most of them knew him in his true form. He needed to buy supplies for his garden, including a new rake, and he was waiting in line at the blacksmith's shop when the witch, whom he did not know, suddenly appeared with her 3 children. Magically appeared, as in one moment she wasn't there, the next minute there she is. Apparently, she appeared directly in front of him in line about 5 seconds before the blacksmith finished with the previous customer, looked up and asked, "Who's next?" "That would be me," the witch said, stepping up to the counter. The wizard was willing to give the woman the benefit of the doubt and believed that she magically transported herself to where she wanted to be and that she hadn't intentionally meant to pop up right in front of him in line. He was even willing to let her get waited on first because he was in no rush. He was ready for warm, leisurely days of peace and quiet. The witch's children, 2 boys and a girl, were poking, bumping, taunting, teasing one another. The older boy was a bully, the younger boy was a sniveler, and the girl, well, she was a whiner. All 3 of the children called out, "Mom, Mom, Mom," in these shrill, annoying, insistent voices. As in, "Mom, he's doing it again. Ma, she started it. And Ma, aren't you there yet?" The witch ignored them completely while she explained to the blacksmith about the gate latch she wanted repaired. The wizard didn't have children of his own, but he thought that having students was almost like having children. He thought to himself, "I would never let my children misbehave like this." Of course, the youngest of his students was 12, and the oldest of these children were 7, but that was still no excuse. The older boy knocked the younger boy backwards, so he stepped on the wizard's toes. "Careful," the wizard said, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder, for the boy gave no sign of recognizing that he wasn't, in fact, standing on the simple ground anymore. He was on someone else's foot. The boy glanced over his shoulder to give the wizard a, "Well, what are your feet doing under my feet?" kind of look, and his brother took the opportunity to smack him on the back of the head. "Ma," the younger boy sniveled, elbowing his sister for good measure. "Mom," the girl whined. "Mom," the older boy said as though he were the victim. The blacksmith was working on the latch, and the witch turned and glared at the wizard. What? She asked somewhere between a snarl and a snap. The wizard wasn't willing to get into a fight, so he just shook his head to indicate he had nothing to say. And he inspected that part of the smithy where the ceiling met the black wall. So he's like, hey, not me, and he just kind of diverts his attention elsewhere. The witch glowered at him for a long moment before returning her attention to the blacksmith. The children got louder and louder and louder, but the witch didn't seem to hear them. She did, however, hear the wizard sigh. She turned around a second time and asked, "Do you have a problem with my children?" "No," he assured her. He couldn't resist asking, "Do you?" "How dare you?" she demanded. "How dare you criticize when you know nothing about us? Do you find my children annoying? Well, did you ever stop to consider whether there might be a reason for them misbehaving? Would you excuse them for being noisy and out of sorts if I told you they've been cooped up in the house for the past 2 weeks with an illness? How about if I told you that their father may not recover and their little sister just died?" "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," the wizard said, for though he had a tendency to get impatient quickly, he didn't wish ill will on anyone. "I had no idea," he said. "Hm." The witch snorted and turned back to the blacksmith, who had finished repairing the latch. The wizard felt terrible for finding the family irksome when they'd been through so much hardship. Under the circumstances, he was willing to forgive them, even the little girl who was sticking her tongue out at him. The smaller boy was still sniveling, but now the wizard realized it was because he probably had a cold. He realized this when the boy, who had his finger stuck up his nose, withdrew that finger to wipe it on his brother's sleeve. The older boy didn't notice because he was surreptitiously tying his sister's braids together. The witch paid the blacksmith, then said, "Come on, children, now we're off to speak to the miller." The wizard wanted her to know that he regretted looking down on her and her children, so he stood where he was and repeated. Again, he said, "I'm truly sorry." The witch was cross for him being in the way. "Why? What did you do now?" she said. "Nothing," he said. I'm sorry for all that's happened to you guys." The witch glanced around suspiciously. What's happened?" she said. The wizard was becoming confused. "The children's father," he said, "who's sick, and the little girl who died," he said. "I never said there was sickness and death," the witch snarled as though he'd intentionally misunderstood. "I said, what if? Actually, my children are the way they are because they're just brats," she said. She shook her head and pushed past him, muttering. "What a wizard," she added. "You'll never find true happiness until you learn to be less judgmental and look beyond the surface of things," she said. If that was a simple statement, it didn't really follow what she'd just said. If it was a spell, normally the wizard would have felt the magic, especially if it was being directed at him. But the children were jostling him and they pushed by on their way out and he might have missed it. Still, if it was a hex or a spell, it wasn't a bad one. He was unhappy with his life as it was. He had his garden in the summer, when it wasn't overrun by rabbits, and fishing and puttering about. And if he sometimes did get lonely, that was usually just about the time his students got back in the fall. Then, about the time they started really getting on his nerves, it would be summer again. Life was satisfying, the wizard thought as he stepped up to the counter to give the blacksmith his order, if maybe somewhat predictable. True happiness, he decided, was just overrated. So, that is the first chapter of this book, guys. He had a run-in with a pretty nasty witch, and she was kind of hateful. She made him feel all bad because she made him think all these horrible things happened to her kids when in reality they were just not behaving well. But he thought what she said didn't make a lot of sense, so he's kind of worried it was a hex or a spell she put on him. I don't know. By the way, we've talked before about genres in class and about how different books hit into different genres, and this is most definitely a fantasy book. Fantasy has witches, wizards, magic, ogres, monsters, and so that's the world that we're going to be in for this book. So, I hope you're excited so far with this chapter. I cannot wait to read more with you guys. I will see you next time. Until then, stay safe, keep reading, and I will see you guys soon. Bye, guys.